Gentlemen, Liz. Thanks for coming. Oh, I'm sorry, Jackie. Sorry.
Just you?
Yeah, I don't see anybody else. Yeah, I thought we were sitting in that room, that other room, but I guess we haven't done that for a bit. I forgot that. So thanks for coming out. Let's get going.
John, your 8th draft.
Ooh, rocking the goatee.
You like that?
Yeah, nice.
Badass.
That's good. Yeah.
You've had to evolve and adapt through this process. Things that now, philosophically, big picture, that are more important in the evaluation or less. Has your view of this changed?
I mean, I think we've changed every year because of the way we self scout and the way we look at the previous drafts and what's worked and what hasn't worked. But I think the process has always been the same in terms of the steps along the way. What starts last spring. Our guys are going to be going to meetings here in 3 weeks. For next year's class. So. The process going all the way through the fall, the All-Star game process, the combine, all the interviews, our pre-combine meetings, and then bringing the coaches in too. So it's a lot that we put on the coaches right at the end of a long season. But we just finished with the coaches this weekend, but. But I think, making sure that you're still using all the tools at your disposal, all the different psychological tests, all the people that have different backgrounds with the different coaches. And then at the end of the day, just, getting with Pete in there and then having the two of us go through it to make sure that we're all set for a smooth process once the weekend starts.
You mentioned bringing the coaches in. How important is that time for the scouts to kind of know what the coaches want and the coaches to know what the scouts are looking at, just sort of that relationship between them?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's essential because you don't want to have somebody you don't want to be taking somebody that the coaches are not comfortable with. But it's a process too because there's a lot of give and take there. It's been a much longer process for us, so when the coaches come in, there's a lot of, hey, check this game out, check that game out for them. And so, they did a good job because they busted their tail in a pretty short period of time to get caught up. Excuse me.
John, we've heard a lot about the last couple of years, the changing style in college football, the spread, how that influences certain positions, quarterback, offensive line. But are you seeing that kind of influence other spots down the line? Is that making your job more difficult in positions that we're not thinking like are obvious, like offensive line and quarterback, things like that?
Sure. I mean, it's not necessarily other positions. It's exactly what you're talking about, quarterbacks and the offensive line. Things are just not quite as clear as they used to be, and that's just my personal belief. There's not like a forest of offensive lineman trees out there that you can just run out in the backyard and go, just based on what's happened to college coaches right now too. They only have so much time with the players, and it's getting shorter for them. So, they have to be able to go out there and score 50, 60 points, right? And that's what you see when you go to these schools. It's what all of our scouts see. You don't see quite as much individual time anymore. It's more of like, just getting out there as a group, and it's not anybody's fault. I mean, it's just, it's like, 4 or 5 star guys that are coming out of college that would rather be known for sacking quarterbacks than protecting them. That's just the way it looks right now. The hope is that the trend, turns a little bit, and we see more of like old school football, if you will,
Expected to. You've seen those trends with other positions, like with cornerbacks. All of a sudden, there was a cover 2 corners, and it shifted more towards
Right.
other guys, and then it kind of goes back and forth, and certain things like that. Do you
Yeah,
expect it to with the offensive
I
lines?
hope so. Yeah, because there's always those ebbs and flows, the different positions, and so, I think it's just one of those spots where hopefully that does change at a certain point in time, I can't tell you if and when. You know, it looks there's when you watch college basketball, the majority of it looks more like, or college football, it looks more like, basketball on grass. You know.
How does that sort of change the way your draft board looks compared to, say, 15 years ago, where you would have had X number of first round, on average, maybe X number of first round offensive linemen compared to now?
Yeah, it definitely affects it because you're able to project the player easier because you're looking at exactly like how they're going to be playing in professional football. So there's a number of, like you watch the Wisconsin guys and you watch, Michigan State and, Michigan, it's easier to evaluate those guys. It's less projection.
What is this week like for you as far as scenarios? When is it constantly something you're playing out in your mind, and then when you get to Thursday, it all just kind of begins?
Yeah, so like I said, we just finished up with the coaches. Got back with our staff this morning just to kind of review some of the differences and the things that we need to work out. Pete and I will spend a significant amount of time together this afternoon and Tuesday, and then Wednesday. I'm usually able to just kind of stare at it and just kind of try to go through the different scenarios of talking to people on the phone and just being by myself for a little while. Our staff's done. I mean, Trent and Scott and Matt Berry and Ed Dodds. I mean, we've been going at it. We've had some long weekends and stuff, so it's been a blast. But now it's time. It's over and it's time to get rolling.
Changes on your board between now and then, or do you leave it pretty much intact?
Not a ton. It's just, there's some tweaking going on. We'll have a medical meeting tomorrow night, so there's some stuff that happens there where we have to pull some people off, or we're able to get some guys back from a previous medical meeting. They had the rechecks at Indianapolis, and so it's kind of tweaking a little bit by round like that, but it's not anything significant unless, something pops up off the field where we have to completely pull somebody off.
When the league says player X failed a drug test, does that cause you to scramble, or you've known enough about that player where it's not going to change any assessment?
It depends on the player. If they've had positive tests before, we signify that on his card. We're still a little bit more old school. Like, we have the legitimate card, so you can kind of move it around a little bit easier. We don't have like the computer wall up there yet, the computer display.
You were saying on the radio a week or two ago about this draft that you thought there was a few more holes maybe than in the past. Do you have a general kind of characterization?
I think the question was more about last year. Last year it was like it just looked really thick all the way through, and this year, yeah, there's just a couple different gaps, and that's just for us. I'm not sure if it's for every other team, but we scout for our team and not for the league, so it's just based on what our needs look like, and there appears to be a couple more gaps in there. More so than last year, but to say previous years, not necessarily. There always are like some ledges in there.
It seems like there's less consensus about the top quarterbacks this year too. Does that make Thursday and Friday potentially a little bit more unpredictable?
Exciting, yeah. Because So I think two out of the last 3 years we've moved back, with people coming up for Teddy Bridgewater and Paxton Lynch. So when you're picking where we're picking down there, you always have to be aware of, what's happening at the top. Somebody asked me, well, you must not even pay attention to the top. I'm like, well, yeah, we have to, because we have to know what those teams are thinking at the top of the second round or the bottom of the first round. There's several teams this year that have, two ones, and, a couple teams that have, Cleveland has like 2 twos. So, you have to be very aware of watch what they're doing.
Is it weird to look at your draft board right now and have nothing in 4 and 5?
Well, we have a lot in 4 and 5, but like when you look at the teams and you look at your team and there's like nothing there in 4 and 5, yeah, it hurts. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Yeah. A little punch in the gut. No, I'm kidding you. But yeah, no, it's like, yeah, you want to have picks all the way through. you kind of look at Cleveland's board and you're like, dang, that's awesome, you know. So there's a lot of teams with and Cleveland's just, I mean, they acquired more last year, so.
What do you think your most pressing needs are right now?
Well, I'll tell you in order. That's a great question. It's just, I hope you respect it's not one I'm going to answer. I mean, it's a great question. I would have asked it if I was sitting there too.
We mentioned the line a lot last year, and you kind of downplayed it as something that didn't need to be addressed with the same urgency. Do you feel similarly this year?
If I came off that way, I didn't mean to. I thought it was a good draft class last year for the offensive line. Like, it was pretty thick all the way through. I think, you know, when you look at the group now, like with Reese and, you know, Jermaine and George and even Joey, the experience that they had last year will definitely help them out next year. We've talked about, us going a little bit too young, probably, and that's something with our self-scouting that we've addressed internally, and so, you know, it's one of those things where, offensive line is one of those deals where, you know, as we were talking about earlier, there was a point where, you know, you couldn't find corners, right? So, or it was just hard to find corners to develop, and that seems to be like a cycle the last several years. So, but we're looking forward to, Luke coming in. Luke can play left tackle or left guard, and we signed Ibushi, and he can play right guard or right tackle. So I think we're gonna have some interesting options in there.
Was it Gary Gilliam? We haven't talked to you kind of since then. What was the thought process on not just kind of not matching with Gary? Was that a tough decision at all?
Yeah, I mean, it was a decision we talked about. Pete and I talked about that there may be an opportunity for him, and we just felt like at this point in time it was we didn't want to like drag it out for him, and so we just felt like it was in our best interest to just not match it and move forward at that position.
John, Richard Sherman has been a very good player on a very good team, always in contention, very popular in the marketplace, well compensated. You said Thursday on the radio that he might need a spark. What did that mean?
A spark. So first and foremost, I think it's most important for you guys to know that we really pride ourselves on having an open dialogue with our players, and everybody just needs like I said a spark. Maybe that's not the right word, but like a little reset. We all do. I know after the draft, I'm gonna have a little reset. Kind of look back and evaluate our whole, the season and how we prepared for the free agency and draft and all that kind of stuff. And I think with him, it was very much the same thing. Like right after the season, he was like, "Hey, I gotta, want to get back to, being where he feels like he could be, and not just him. He's talking about the whole team."
Why be so open? I mean, a lot of times this organization will just, even on an injury, say, well, that's internal matter, we don't talk about it. What's curious?
Yeah, I don't no necessarily lying to people. Like, I try to teach my boys not to lie about things, so I don't really think we just didn't really feel like there was anything to hide. People say, well, why do you have your, business out in the open or whatever? I mean, it was basically already out there. People have been talking about it, and there are rumors about it and that sort of thing. We have had conversations with teams, but it's just he's at a good place. He's here today working. With Earl's here, Cam's here, so we're all just at a very good place. And it's one of those things like if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and everybody's okay with it right now. He met with Pete last week. They had another great conversation. So. It's just been about like, he may see it as Richard may see it as a fresh start for him, and we may see it as a way to clear some cap room and get younger. But neither side is like super urgent about it, if that makes sense.
How did the idea originate?
Just like I was talking about earlier, we just always have a ton of open communication with our players.
John, What needs to happen, if Richard does come back, what needs to happen from last year to the kind of new season to sort of clear the air or?
Oh, I think it's just been time. You know, the season ended, and you know, just kind of getting through. You know, those guys. I mean, they've been. You know, the season ended for them a long time ago. For me, the season seems like it just ended like 2 weeks ago. You know, so I think just time.
When would you
Time
like,
heals all wounds, or whatever. You know.
when would you like to have that all resolved by?
What's that?
The Sherman situation. Is there a cutoff point or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much honest right now.
Is there anything more from your organization standpoint on Marshawn Lynch and what is going on with that, or is that just?
No, I mean, nothing really new. You know, I mean, they're still talking, and then the steps after that were to be if they came to an agreement that, you know, Reggie and I would discuss, you know, a form of compensation.
To be clear on the Sherman situation, is it a thing where you just want it, okay, we're done with that, we explored it, and now we move forward, or is it an ongoing?
Yeah, right now we've kind of moved past it, and you know, if somebody calls and goes crazy with something, then we'll discuss it again. But at this point, I don't mean go crazy, but you know what I mean, like give you like compensation where it's something where you really truly have to think about it and consider it, then we would have to consider it. And we would consider it because of like I said, it's been a mutual thing. It's okay, and we feel like, you know, it would clear cap room and we would be able to get younger, but that's the only reason. It's the only reason we would do it. I mean, the guys, top cornerbacks in the league, you don't just like give them away, you know.
We rarely hear you guys talk about possibly trading anyone on the team you have. Does that make it weird or awkward at all if nothing gets done and he's back?
No, because of that open communication that we have. You know, it's I can't be any more honest with you than that. I mean, we could talk about anything. I mean, I shouldn't say that. We don't talk about everything. It's not, don't get too personal.
Would this be sort of an
But I was asked a direct question, and I wasn't, you know, I had seen it, you know, on the ticker myself, so I didn't think it was a big deal to talk about it because of the relationship that we have.
Would this be sort of an unprecedented situation heading into next year, though, with kind of a very public kind of playing out of this whole scenario and then bringing him back?
No, because it would. I could see why you would think that from the outside, but within these walls, no.
I think the Raiders have said they'd like to have the Marshawn thing decided by the end of this week. Is that your kind of understanding of the timeline for it too, or is that?
Yeah, I would think Reggie would want to go into the draft knowing that, you know, they have another runner or not.
John, it seems league-wide there's been more of a trend that one-year deals were done this year with free agents. Do you have an explanation for why it seems to be that way?
It seemed like a lot of teams that had a ton of cap room weren't necessarily being quite as aggressive as they have in the past. I'm talking about the totality of it. So I think there was a number of guys that were just kind of looking for good situations. And then what you're doing is you know, where we are from a cap standpoint, you're trying to sell them on, you know, the city, the fans, you know, how great the stadium is, you know, how wonderful the local media is to work with. And, you know, just basically like, you know, just trying to recruit the guys on a, hey, you know, kind of like we call them like the bridge deal or a prove it deal. And we've had experience with it in the past where it's worked out. And so we thought that was the best shot for us to be able to compete when we had less cap room, to be able to compete with the teams that, you know, quite frankly, had a lot more cap room than we did.
Does that make it easier to sell a guy when you can point to, you know, whether it was an Averill or Ben or somebody who kind of came in on deal similar and was rewarded later on?
Yeah, absolutely. And with, you know, especially with Pete's, you know, the central theme of the whole program, the whole organization being competition, the guys know that, you know, if they come here and you know, are a pro and play hard and, be smart and tough and reliable if they're going to be on the field.
Trevon Boykin had an interesting offseason this year. Is there a thought that you want to bring in some more competition at that backup quarterback spot too, and just where does he stand right now?
Yeah, I would think we'd bring in some competition. You know, his deal. You know, it looked like 2 separate arrests, but you know, it really was not. So, but yeah, I mean, we've talked all along about wanting to have, you know, at least 3 quarterbacks in here competing. Last year, you know, we wanted to get him as many reps as possible.
What do you anticipate Deion Jordan being at this point in time? He's barely played in a couple of years, a couple of suspensions and injuries. What do you think?
Yeah, he's a little heavier now, so we're planning on playing him at you know, along the defensive line. We've always thought he's a heck of an inside rusher too. He's always had the speed off the edge. He's got the length. He's got just a real natural feel for like working guys' edges and stuff. So defensive line, you know, whether it's end, you know, 5-3, maybe some Leo as well. I'm not quite sure, but you know, he's at this point it looks like defensive line.
Did he have to convince you or anything that some of the issues he had in Miami are behind him at this point, or
did he have to convince us? Absolutely, and we're still, you know, we're still working through things.
How do you feel your depth at cornerback is?
I'm not good to ask that. I don't ever feel like we are good at, like, I never go to bed thinking like we just, man, we're good. Like we're always pushing the envelope to try to add as much as we possibly can. And I'm talking about like every position. I mean, we're talking about special team stuff this morning, you know. So
Is this corner class coming up? Is it as special as sort of everybody's been talking about?
it's good. It's definitely good. It definitely got. You know, by the time we get there, you know, we end up, you know, probably, you know, beating these guys up a little bit too much, you know. You know, it starts off like there's a lot of excitement, you know, and everybody's right after the season. There's a lot of stuff in the media about how, you know, great it is and everything, and there are some good numbers. But, you know, leave it up to us to kind of like pick everybody apart until, you know, we get to the draft and then it's time to pick, and you got to pick somebody. So like you can poke holes in anybody. We always talk about like looking for, you know, trying to accentuate the guy's positives. Like it's the easiest thing in the world is to sit down and, you know, talk about like, you know, how short I am, and you know, I have real stubby arms, and you know, well, but what can I do? You know, which you'd have to search long and hard for.
Back to the quarterback conversation, based on
Cornerback or quarterback?
Quarterback.
Yeah.
Based on your background and the people that you learned under, when you took this job, could you have imagined that in 7 drafts, only taking 1 quarterback?
No, it's just happened that way. It really has. You know, it's really, I've always thought, you know, you need to have, you know, one in the chamber all the time, and have a guy, you know, getting ready, and it just hasn't gone that way for us, you know. I don't know how to explain it to you. It's just the way things have been stacked out for us, and you know, the quarterbacks, the level of play, or you know, the upside that we've seen, or how they're going to fit with us, just hasn't matched up like from a round standpoint. But that doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen. It's just that's a great question, because it's kind of like, yeah, you're right. We haven't done that, and philosophically, that's something that, you know, you'd want to try to do. Most important position on the field.
John, it's been said that McCaffrey and Peppers are kind of like are like players who don't have an NFL position nailed in the draft. They can play multiple positions. Is that kind of athletic thing really important to you, to have a guy who can?
Yeah, I personally wouldn't say that. I mean, I think both those guys are incredibly talented, incredibly athletic, and if you figure out a role for them, then you know, it'll happen.
John, there was a 3-year stretch from 2010, 2012 where you guys were drafting multiple Pro Bowlers every year, maybe future Hall of Famers. Is that a fair
How
standard?
come that doesn't happen anymore? What's your problem, dude?
Do you feel like people hold you to an unfair standard based on that at all? Just because?
No, I think it's really a reflection of like I said, the self scouting and how you what mistakes have you made, and then also we've really Dan Morgan and his staff on the pro side have done a great job of bringing in practice squad guys, waiver claims. We've traded for a couple guys, like anybody we could possibly get in the mix. I think our level of competition has been raised. And then also, I think, I forget what year it was, but, I think we had like 21 guys that were in our camp that played for other people. So it's been hard for, guys to make this team. I'm not making an excuse. I think there's a part of that's reality combined with, okay, what was it at this player's core that we weren't real correct on?
Is there any, John, I'm sorry, is there any evaluation edge to you and the University of Washington guys, or when you were at Green Bay, the University of Wisconsin guys? That proximity and familiarity, is there any edge there, or is it all pretty much a level playing field for
No, I don't think there's an edge. I think you need to be careful to over-evaluate the guys because we see them so often. We zip over there and watch practice or their pro days, or you see them play so much and they're talked about so often that you have to be careful not to be too hard on them. So I think it actually can go the other way. But in terms of access, you're right. Yeah, being able to see them, that part's a benefit.
Does going into this draft with just the 7 picks, does that change anything in any way at all for you, or?
It changes. We'd like to have more, more is better, depending on the draft, but it doesn't, it changes the way you try to strategize because you're not picking all the way through the draft. Excuse me. So you're basically, having the 3 threes is, the top, 5 picks in 3 rounds is outstanding. Don't get me wrong, but you always feel that certain level of anxiety about what's going to happen. And like John was pleasantly brought up before, we don't have a 4th round pick, we don't have a 5th round pick. So are we gonna? How do you compensate for that? And that's the part where you're kind of like that's the part where somebody asked me what this week's like, that's part of it too. Like, how do we move around? And it's not, you can strategize on it all day long, but it's still not as easy to move around as people would anticipate. It's not like, what was that movie? Draft Day. I couldn't think of Draft Day, where they're just like, calling around.
You were in that movie.
I was not in that movie. Mm-mm.
No, the character was the one eating pancakes.
Yeah, the character was like a, really good looking, like 60-year-old dude or something.
John, you talked about
Not a
self.
short guy.
You talked about
Hasn't
self.
seen the sun and. Sorry, Jason.
No, you want to keep going?
No.
Okay. You talked about self-scouting. When you look at mistakes the last several years or whatever, has there been any trend or theme or anything that you guys have noticed?
Yes.
In those?
I'm not going to share them with you. I'm just not, because that's just a competitive thing that I would rather not get into.
Where are Tyler Lockett and Earl Thomas in their kind of progression at this point? When do you think they can get on the field with you?
I'm not caught up on Earl. Tyler sounds like he's doing awesome. Earl is back here for the first time today, and I think he, cruised in and, seen Doc a couple times, but I'm just not sure. Nothing negative. I just don't have an update on that.
Joel Cole had the knee stuff in October. Where is he at?
He's doing great. Yeah, he's doing great. We'll bring him along, but he's doing great.
So there's no concern about him being ready for the start of the season or anything?
Not for the start of the season. You know, I think in camp he'll be a guy that'll be monitored that we need to be careful of.
Anything else? Thank you.
All right. See you guys.